I was at the Empire Awards in London probably 5 years ago, and one of the interviewers asked me if I could be a superhero, who would I be? And I say, I'd like to be the Spider-Man after Andrew Garfield. And he says, would you do the reboot of the reboot? And I said, yeah, the reboot of the reboot, maybe in 10 years' time. I would never have guessed that that would first have come true, and secondly, have come true within 5 years. So that was a crazy, crazy day for me. One of the interesting things for me is how the movie starts. We sort of go back in time to relive the Civil War splash panel fight from Peter's perspective. And we see him having the time of his life. He's on a private jet with Happy, and he's staying in this crazy hotel room, to suddenly him being crammed on a subway, late for school. No one's called him to let him know that there's another mission going on. And it's nice to see that contrast from the kid at summer camp to suddenly the kid back at school. And the whole movie, Peter's trying to prove himself to Tony, to prove to him that he is ready to be an Avenger. He is old enough to take on bigger tasks. But Tony keeps putting him down, putting him down. This take on Spider-Man is more of the story of how Peter Parker deals with what he's going through, and less of a superhero, more as a kid at school. So I definitely think like boys of our age and younger are really going to connect with Peter, because everyone goes through that stage of being late for school, not doing your homework, asking the girl to the dance, and then we also get to see a kid live the dream that every kid has dreamed of since they were a child. You know, being a superhero is the #1 dream, and we really get to explore a kid having fun and enjoying himself, which often isn't the case with superheroes. Often being a superhero is a burden, but right now for Peter it is the best thing that could possibly have happened to him.
For me, just the fact that when we were shooting Iron Man in 2007, he gets shrapnel in his heart, and then Yinsen puts a metallic tokamak reactor in his chest to keep the shrapnel out of his heart. I mean, it's beyond metaphoric, you know, it's literally the physicalization of it. And I think that's why Stan Lee and the whole just Marvel lexicon is so, you know, it's, you know, you still got Thor and Hulk and these other things, but at the heart of it, these are all, you know, they're just these archetypes of kind of broken people. I appreciate that there's a modicum of desperation going on in this during the Civil War of it all. He's like, man, we need backup and who's available and all that. And he kind of got a lead on a prospect, kind of like a baseball scout. And then, fortunately, he just develops this belief in Mr. Parker. First of all, Tony is unlike many superheroes. He's been in a committed relationship for some time, but just like, you know, if you have a nice wife, she'll say, "Oh, you can flirt, just don't do anything about it." And I really wanted to play that up because, you know, the Aunt May was remarkably different previously, and I've known Marissa for a long time, and she's just a perfect. You look at the way that Spider-Man: Homecoming is cast; it tells you everything you need to know about what a fresh start this franchise is getting. You know what it's like? Your kid turns 16, and that means that they're supposed to be able to drive. But, you know, now there's all those apps where you can find out where they are. It's kind of like that. He's attempting in his own half-assed way to do some modern parenting. And also, the stakes are a lot higher than are you going to get a ticket or be an offender bender. I mean, you know, lest we forget, he pulled Peter Parker into life and death situations shortly after meeting him, just a year or so ago. he's self-aware enough to know that he might not be making the right decisions, but you do what you can, and he's a lot more personable than he used to be. Also, if you think about all the times he's been up against these insurmountable odds and situations and all that, it is a little bit the idea of what we were talking about earlier too. Of you're looking for folks you can kind of pass the ball to in case you got to take a powder. In a way, I think Tony looks at him as, wow, this is a really capable kind of, he's got a good moral psychology. He doesn't have the limitations that Tony was born into by being in this military industrial complex family. This movie is really fun. It's really well conceived. It's highly entertaining. It takes full advantage of all of the possibilities that you would hope a new iteration of Spider-Man would have. It really delivers. It depends on where you join the party. There's an argument to be made that you know, sitting on a podium with Kevin Feige, with Michael Keaton, and Amy Pascal, you're going like, who really started this when? It's just something that generationally speaking, it just kind of it seems to still have legs, and I say that as a huge fan of the Spider-Man comics, and it's Peter Parker that introduced me to this universe to begin with. So for me, it's a homecoming. When you see it back, or you get the feedback from an audience or from people who are seeing it and reviewing it, you go, yeah, you were right to do that version of it, not this version, because it's always a game of degrees and inches and all that stuff. But also for me, seeing all this young talent coming in, and they've been influenced by me and Michael Keaton, and now we're actually, speaking of homecoming, we're kind of feeling like, what, these kids are pretty damn good.
He is interesting to me because he's a citizen, and he thinks to himself, what's fair about this? It's a good question. And the thing that I used as my driving interior kind of motivation, not to sound too actory, but the question that is in his head is probably a really good one, which is, where's mine? When I guess I'll say Tony Stark, but I think he sees it above and beyond Tony Stark. When they all have theirs, where's mine? I've been working for mine. You've taken this from me. So he says, I'll figure a way to get mine, and he creates this tremendous, he and his boys functioning, I don't know if you want to call it a suit, but a functioning outfit, let's call it, and not just what he puts on his body, but the outfit around him, and it becomes quite effective. He is basically saying, I'm running a business here. I'm running a business that is based on me hanging on to my business, but also, in a lot of ways, he's fighting corruption. He does corrupt things in order to fight what he sees as corruption, and I think he has a pretty strong argument to some degree. But yeah, then it overtakes all of his boys, and like I say, him to some degree. He kind of likes this kid. I mean, he actually likes him, but business is business.
Ned's actually this very sweet, genuine, like, he's very nerdy, I guess you'd say. He loves what he loves, and he loves, Star Wars. He loves technology. He's super duper smart. And all he wants to do is just be like Peter's, like, right-hand man, sort of. Because he's sort of losing, like, that connection with him. And he thinks that Peter's getting too cool for him, and that he needs to, like, up his game so they can, be together forever, basically, because that's all he is. He's just a bro. And it grows over the film. It's sort of like, because our relationship that we try to portray is that we were friends before, and, like, we got together again. And so it's sort of like a reunion. I love that John takes in, like, an actor's perspective. He really takes suggestions. It's really, because when creating something like this, it's a collaborative effort, and it's a lot simpler when the actors and the director have, like, a clear, like, path or, like, clear vision of what it should be. And so John really hits down the head where he wants to collaborate with you, and that's what I really appreciate. It was more like a finally moment for me. Like, I've been waiting for a world where Spider-Man could get into the Avenger thing, just in general, and just to have those two people really, and to have, like, a little Chris Evans thing on the TV monitor, that's really cool. And so, I mean, it's really just like I've been waiting for this moment for a while.
I think we have a great group of people. Like, we have a great cast. Like, we hang out all the time. It's not forced. We're not like, hey, you guys get along and like each other. We do. We really do. And that's how, it's just great. The casting is awesome. Everybody is, in a weird way, very similar to their characters. Like, even if it's just a little bit, their personalities, something about our characters is usually very similar to who we are. Another really cool thing is, like, he's having to save his friends, but they don't know that they're being saved by their friend, and they don't know that, he's literally up there, like, afraid of heights, not knowing what to do, trying to figure out how to work his suit. Like, there's all this stuff that's going on, and which is, again, it's like if Spider-Man were real and he were really a 16-year-old boy in high school who just has to figure out how to save somebody from, it's not gonna go as smooth as one would think, He's not gonna just be this trained professional in 2 seconds, He's gonna have awkward moments. He's gonna mess up and be scared, because that's what happens when you're 16-year-old saving the world. What I love about the story of this film is the fact that it's real. You know what I'm saying? Everything is coming from a real place. You get to explore what it's like to be a regular kid, because everybody was an awkward teenager. Everybody goes through that phase. Everybody goes through the awkward moments. Everybody has to deal with it. Even if you thought you were, like, the coolest kid in high school, you probably weren't. So, we all look back on things that, like, happened in high school, like, yo, that was embarrassing. It's the same, it's all people can connect to that experience and being that kid. And I think that it just makes it real. It makes it understandable. It makes it relatable. It's like, of course he's saving the world and stuff like that, but he's also going through puberty and dealing with girls and hormones and, awkwardness, which, again, everyone goes through, So it's great. And all the comedy, I think, comes out of those real moments. It's not like forced comedy. It's just like you're laughing because that happened to you too at one point in your life.
I like the relationship that this generation of characters has with the younger generation on Spider-Man. There's something really fun about Tom Holland and nice juxtapositioning of Peter Parker and Tony Stark. They're both eggheads. They both are kind of nerdy, both heroic. I had a great time working with John Watts. You know, he comes out of a similar background that I do, smaller independent films, and it's interesting watching him bring his sensibility to a larger scale production. Of course, he's being looked after well by his support crew, but it still takes a vision from a director, and it's fun being directed by him and working with the actors that he's working with. Most people know who Spider-Man is, even people who never read comic books. We grew up with Spider-Man, whether it's the cartoons or an electric company. I remember being aware of Spider-Man from a very young age, and he's probably the Marvel hero with the most name recognition coming into the film world. And then, of course, there's been a lot of great Spider-Man movies, and so now to have him reemerge in this new form, I think is exciting. I think the fans already enjoyed his depiction in Civil War, so it's not like you're coming in cold. You know, when we first did Iron Man, you know, we worked on the film not knowing whether or not the fans would be into Robert playing Tony Stark or if they would be accepting of a hero that a lot of them hadn't heard of. In the case of Spider-Man, everybody knows who he is. Everybody's rooting for him to do well on the big screen, and people really dug Tom Holland playing him in Civil War. So on this film, even though it's the first Spider-Man film of the new iteration, it feels a bit like you're inheriting momentum from a sequel because he's already appeared and been such a fan favorite.
I grew up a comic book nerd, and I have read most every comic in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and just Marvel Universe in general. And so I knew most of the things that they were talking about before most other people did. And I was the one looking at comments, looking at all the message boards, seeing what it is before I got cast. And I'm just happy to be joining it. And it's kind of like a dream come true to actually be a part of Spider-Man. I play Flash Thompson, and he's kind of a character who people don't really like him, per se, in any regard. Even his decathlon teammates don't really like him, and they tolerate him because he is somewhat smart. And he is frustrated with Peter's character because Peter is so talented and so smart. He doesn't need to study, and he can skate by, as opposed to Flash, who studies extremely hard and works his butt off and still second fiddle to Peter Parker. Tom is such an amazing Peter Parker. I think because he is so young and he has a youthful vibe to it, it's very easy to relate to, being, you know, we're the same age and everything. When I saw him in Civil War, I think that's the first time you get to see an inkling of what he's going to do with the character, and it's quite amazing. He's a great Peter Parker because he is that nerdy kid, you know, trying to figure out how to fit in this huge world with, you know, the likes of Iron Man and Captain America and the Winter Soldier and all these great characters. And then at the same time, he's a fantastic Spider-Man, which he takes because he is very athletic and does most of his own stunts, and is just overall very energetic and very physical with his body. And I think when you see him be scared, even though you can't see his face, you feel him actually scared. And he's very physical with his role as Spider-Man, and I think that's what sets him apart, and I think that's what makes him a fantastic Spider-Man.
I definitely saw the films. I mean, I think that, yeah, they're huge. Of course I saw them. But growing up, like, we had a lot of the comics. My brother and my cousins and I, like, had a huge collection of comics of all the superhero things. And it was a big part of my childhood, honestly, reading all of these comics. And And my dad's an artist, and he would draw like little Spider-Man comics for my brother and I, just like, but they were like, hey, Laura, it's Spider-Man. And it was like the coolest thing ever. So to be part of it now in this capacity, like something that I loved so much and was such a big part of my childhood, it's really surreal. I'm really claustrophobic, so like actually being trapped in the elevator was really stressful for me, and we were trapped in it for a week. Luckily, I was with Jacob and Martin, and they're like the funniest, coolest guys. We actually had so much fun. We just made jokes the whole time. But the actual falling down of it, I mean, I was on this wire 30 feet up in the air, and I kind of love that stuff. Like, actually, that was much less scary to me than being stuck in the elevator. Because, I don't know, I grew up, like, doing circus arts and rock climbing and all of that stuff. Like, my family's joking, like, you've been waiting your whole life for this moment. Liz is cool in that she's not just damsel in distress. You know, there's like this other ways that she's making things happen for herself. But when you fall down an elevator shaft, it's helpful to have Spider-Man around.
The world of being in this giant movie, but it also has a real heart, and it has a lot, actually it has this big theme of community activism running underneath it all. It's a very think global, act local kind of movie, but it has all the bells and whistles of a giant action movie. She raised him from when he was very, very young, and she gives him a kick in the pants to get going when he needs to. She's very loose with him. Their relationship is very close and kind of tender, actually. But right now, it's clear that he's hiding things from her, so she's concerned about what might be going on. She's watching him to see how he's changed from being a hyper-capitalist into a person who does more good and is on his own redemption trail, and watching how he might be influencing Peter so that Peter isn't just becoming a workhorse in an industry, but is still a boy becoming a man and has space to explore his inner life and be a kid and become a man the way he wants to become a man, and hopefully according to the values that May and her husband instilled him with.
I had a dirt bike when I was in high school, and I loved riding my dirt bike. That was the main thing in my life that I had to look forward to. And basically, I spent my whole day trying to maximize the amount of time that I would get to ride my dirt bike around. Now imagine if you were Spider-Man. Imagine if you had Spider-Man's abilities and could do all this amazing stuff. You would spend every moment of your day trying to maximize the amount of time you get to be Spider-Man, because it would be the best feeling in the world. And I think that's a sort of a new take that we have on it, which is Spider-Man is, there is all the responsibility that comes with the power of being Spider-Man. But I think it's also important to remember how much fun it would be to be swinging from building to building. At the beginning of the movie, Peter loves being Spider-Man, but he doesn't love being Peter Parker. You know, Peter Parker sort of represents everything that he was, which to him is just a weird, outsidery, science-y nerd. And now he has this whole new future life ahead of him, being a superhero and having met Tony Stark and, thinking that he beat up Captain America and all that. That's all. He's already moved on. But what he hasn't done is sort of come to terms with who Peter Parker is and everything that sort of happened to him in the past. I think that's going to be the journey, is him realizing that you can't move ahead to be Spider-Man until you've really figured out who you are as as Peter Parker. The way we've been talking about it is all the other movies we've seen in the Marvel Universe have been sort of the penthouse level. You see the Avengers in Avengers Tower, you see Thor, in his world, and it's going to be the same thing with Doctor Strange, and all of this has been like sort of the penthouse level. But now I feel like with Ant-Man, and then also especially with Spider-Man, now we're seeing the ground level of what life is like in the MCU. We're seeing like what a day-to-day, what a day in the life is like of a kid who goes to high school in a world where the Avengers exist and where a portal is opened up over New York City, where, Chitauri aliens have come through and almost destroyed, half of New York. What are the repercussions of that? What is the day-to-day of that, And how do things like gods existing on Earth affect like your high school history class and physics? And I just want to see what that's like. And I think, we're not going too deep into that, but I think that makes for a really interesting angle in which to see a high school movie.